Bernard Nothouse was recently convicted of counterfeiting and fraud for minting gold coins. A government attorney called what he did, quote, a unique form of domestic terrorism. In that case, maybe Ben Bernanke and the Federal Reserve are terrorizing us domestically because they print money out of thin air every day. With me now, someone who finds this just as troubling as I do, Euro-Pacific Capital CEO and radio talk show host Peter Schiff, author of How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes. Peter, it's a pleasure. Welcome here. What happened to Nothouse? What did he do? From whom did he get permission? And why do you think the feds went after him?
Well, they went after him because he was providing an alternative to Federal Reserve notes. He wasn't counterfeiting anything. I mean, you couldn't confuse the gold and silver coins that he was making for any kind of legal tender. In fact, all of his customers knew that the coins they were buying were not legal tender. In fact, they specifically wanted them because they didn't want U.S. dollars because Ben Bernanke is creating so much inflation. They wanted a store of value. So what the government is actually accusing him of being a terrorist is for providing an alternative to the U.S. dollar.
What would you do with these coins? Would you keep them so that they would appreciate in value as the value of gold goes up, or would you use them to go to the drugstore and buy toothpaste?
Well, if the drugstore would accept it, but most people were saving them or bartering them in a small community. I mean, I think Nothouse encouraged people to barter them, but barter is not illegal. But it wasn't like he printed $100 bills and tried to pass them off as legitimate.
What do you think the government is afraid of with what Nothouse did? And before you answer that, didn't he tell the FBI? Oh. Didn't he tell the Treasury Department? And didn't they all say, yeah, go ahead and do it?
Oh, yeah, they knew about it. What they're afraid of, the government is now taxing us through inflation. We have a $1.6 trillion deficit. They're not raising taxes, so they're stealing our purchasing power. But in order to steal it, we have to be using dollars. And as people shun the dollar and look towards things like gold and silver, and look, anybody who has some of these Nothouse Liberty dollars, they have much more value because, you know, the silver price is now at a 31-year high. People were buying those things when silver was $10 an ounce. Now it's 40.
All right.
I mean, and how can you counterfeit something? The Federal Reserve note has no intrinsic value. At least the coins he was making had some intrinsic value.
All right, and the Federal Reserve note isn't even worth the paper it's printed on, literally. Why wouldn't the government go after Ben Bernanke for being a domestic terrorist?
Well, in actuality, our Federal Reserve notes are counterfeit. You see, the reason that it was illegal to counterfeit Federal Reserve notes is because before, when they were legitimate money, it was a note, IOU, silver or gold.
Right.
And so a legitimate Federal Reserve note could be redeemed for silver and gold, but a counterfeit note couldn't be. But today, there's no difference between the Federal Reserve notes that the Fed counterfeits or the ones that a criminal would counterfeit, because neither one of them are backed by gold, because a note has to be a promise to pay, and the Federal Reserve notes don't pay anything.
Obviously, I wasn't the judge in the case, and obviously, if I was, I would never have let the prosecution tell the jury this guy's a domestic terrorist. But if he is a domestic terrorist for suggesting that people trade in silver and gold, which has intrinsic value, wouldn't there be a lot of other domestic terrorists around here? Like perhaps the person sitting across the table from me?
Well, first of all, they should have thrown the case out for lack of evidence. They had no evidence that he counterfeited anything or committed fraud.
Right.
But, yes, what did he do? He advocated an alternative to the dollar, and people chose it. Now, what was his alternative? Gold and silver. I do the same thing. I have a gold and silver company. I encourage people to buy gold and silver and to barter it. And so am I a terrorist? By the definition of the Justice Department, I am. And if Nothouse is a terrorist for selling gold, well, maybe anyone who buys gold can later be called a terrorist. Maybe that's going to be a reason why the government confiscates gold. And the interesting thing is, Nothouse had about $7 million worth of gold and silver that he was storing for clients, and now the government wants to seize it as contraband. So who's terrorizing his customers? Nothouse or the government who's taking all their money?
The government's going to be very surprised when this case is reversed on appeal. Peter Schiff, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. And don't miss Freedom Watch tomorrow, when we'll have